Yippee-Ki-Yay, mother.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Yippee-Ki-Yay Mother Podcast.
Dun, dun, dun.
Wait, I got to put on my fake glasses.
Okay. That's awesome. All right, so tonight,
Gesundheit.
I wish... Okay, so what we're doing is remakes, and the wheel spun to me, and it was the Taking of the Pelham 123. I wish the Taking of the Pelham 123 2009 had as good a soundtrack as the 1974 version, Taking of the Pelham 123. So we're going to review the remake of that film. We're going to do a round of what you watch, and then we're going to spin.
I got a question.
Slow down. Then we're going to spin the wheel for the next film.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Chris isn't here right now,
right?
And it's the first week that we didn't do the cage match. Interesting timing.
I think maybe that says something. I don't know what it is.
How about that?
You mean the highly successful cage match?
Yeah,
show.
yeah. Those 70
That's
people love it. I mean,
I tell you what, last week's one has like 76 views.
No, yeah. I mean,
I think that was one of the best ones.
I agree.
It was.
It was.
I think people love watching us decide which one gets out of jail, and the last one was a good one to end on.
Like we always do, we beat the dead horse, which is fine. That's what we do. I don't have a problem
beating
with
a dead horse on this show. I would call it a trope of this show.
Is that
definitely a euphemism for subscribing?
It's not.
You what?
Hitting the notification button, hitting the like button.
Please.
I'm sorry. Chris is missing this because he's seen all three there are three versions of this film. There's the 74 version. Yes. There's the 74. There's the 1990 ABC television version starring Vincent D'Onofrio and Donnie Wahlberg. And John,
in that too.
Woke in the 90s, they switched out some of the criminals to be women.
Yeah.
So
I noticed that.
Woke has been around a long time.
No.
So yes, we're gonna talk about tonight is 2009's The Taking of the Pelham 123, directed by Tony Scott, starring Denzel Washington and John Travolta. It is a remake of the 1974 classic The Taking of the Pelham 123, starring Walter Matthau and Robert Shaw, the two headliners.
Martin Balsam.
And I said the two headliners. We can go through the cast in that film. The cast in that film is amazing.
Yeah.
At 74. Everything about that film is amazing. Everything about this film is more frenetic, faster cars, terrible soundtrack, over the top acting. The villain John Travolta is a screaming maniac, where Robert Shaw was a very quiet, distinguished criminal who was way more powerful.
Actually, scary, yeah,
and scary. I will say this: I didn't hate the 2009 version of The Taking of Pelham 123. And the amount of reverence I had for the first one, I was actually excited to see the 2009 The Taking of the Pelham 123. But boy, oh boy, as much as I love Tony Scott and I love Denzel Washington and I love John Travolta, this was a hot mess that I didn't hate. I'm going to admit it. I didn't hate it because it also had James Gandolfini. Why can't I remember him? James
Gandolfini.
Gandolfini
Italian names
as the mayor. If you remember the mayor in the 74 version, he was kind of a comical take on Ed Koch, the mayor of New York at the time.
Ed Koch wasn't the mayor at the time.
And in the 74 version, well, it was, but I know that, but it was supposed to be Ed Koch. And the 74 version, New York City was a huge star of the film.
Yeah.
The griminess, all the stuff that related to the New York. And this one is a Tony Scott special, which means cuts don't last longer than 2.5 seconds. There's cars that bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce, and people get out of them, and they're all fine.
Michael Bay with more taste.
You keep saying that. I think Michael Bay has a lot of taste, but
it definitely had a Michael
just
Bay
different.
vibe.
Of course, it had a Michael, but Michael Bay got it from Tony Scott. Tony Scott's been doing this forever. The other thing that this film has that Sean and I talk about all the time is backstory that gets in the way of the film. Because if you remember in the first film, Garber, played by Walter Matthau, is just the guy that happened to be at the mic when this thing went down. We don't know anything about Garber's background in that film. We just know that he turns out to be a really smart guy, but we don't know if he's married. We don't know what's going on in his story. And the 2009, of course, Denzel playing Garber. I think he had a different first name. has a whole backstory of potentially taking a bribe that figures into this thing. He has a wife he's got to bring milk home to. And Sean and I have talked about this before. It just, there's no reason for that in a film, in a heist film like this. And it kind of, Tony Scott tried to heighten it up a little bit with some internet stuff that goes on in this film, and the fact why John Travolta, I forget what his name was in this, Ryder, right? Ryder.
Yeah.
His whole reason with a Y, his whole reason for this robbery had to do with getting back at New York City through the stock market, blah 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 blah. Where the other one was just a straight. They don't even use the names, the color names, the Mr. Gray, Mr. White, Mr. Blue. They don't even use that in this one. We don't even know who the other
characters are all invisible.
The only one is Guzman, the Guzman character, the guy who played the conductor, who ends up, we can spoil this, right? 2009. It's not who ends up getting shot by the
spoiled anyway. So.
It's all spoiled. Yeah, exactly. What's his name? Guzman.
Luis Guzman.
Luis Guzman, who gets shot in the head by a sniper
because his ankle got bit by a rat.
Because the ankle,
right.
The rat went up his pants and he shot. I watched Mark Commode's review of this film, and he did a funny thing. It's a very early review from him, and he accentuated how much the camera shakes in this film, how loud John Travolta was, how it just is such an inferior sequel to the first one that he could barely contain himself, because he loves the old films for sure. And having said all that, you know what? It's a guilty pleasure. Travolta's doing his Travolta thing. And Denzel Washington, even though he's got this crappy backstory, is Denzel Washington. And, he brings a lot of power. Not to mention Gandolfini as the mayor. You've got Turturro comes in as a hostage negotiator. A lot of heavy-duty hitters in this one. And heavy hitters.
Way better New York thriller than Phone Booth, so that's good.
I think this was actually filmed in New York City.
It looked like some of it was on the bridges and things like that.
A lot of helicopter shots of the bridges and stuff. So anyway, obviously I'm a huge, huge fan. This whole podcast started because of the Taking of the Pelham 1, 2, 3. I think it's one of our first or second or third episodes we've ever did.
Episode 3.
And we had to do it twice because the first one didn't record right or something. I forget what happened. So I have such a love for that other film that to even attempt a remake, it'd be like remaking Jaws. I don't think I could go into a Jaws remake and feel, I don't know. It's like, why mess with a classic? It makes no sense to me. The first one still holds up to this day. If you watch that film to this day, it has the same excitement it had when it came out in 1974. And the score by David Shire is just phenomenal. Like, I don't even remember the music in this 2009. It was all chaotic.
Ralph, I'm confused about this. So, remakes. What are we supposed to be comparing the two? Are we supposed
We're just talking about a remake. What?
I'm looking at both films. I think we're comparing them.
It almost okay. All right.
I don't want to get into. We're essentially talking about them, so that compares them. But really, I think you focus on the remake and how it relates.
Have you seen this before?
Yeah.
So what made you pick it to talk about? If you don't sound like you're crazy about it compared to the first one,
well,
so why would
why did you pick the ones you wanted to do for a remake?
I'm not being accusatory.
I love the first one so much. I just wanted to talk about the remake of this one because I was a little excited when I heard they were going to remake it because I love the first one so much. But you get a little disappointed. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also occasionally, I know the ones I picked, I think the remakes are all inferior, but occasionally you'll get a remake that's superior. That is certainly not the case with this film.
No.
Well, what's funny is that sometimes they'll do a remake and you're like, it's so different. Like, why did they do this? Why did they do that? This movie, I feel like it would have been, by definition, a tighter and shorter and better movie with all the things you're talking about, Ralph, if it had been more faithful to the original movie, because it's just got so much extra stuff on it. It's not a terrible movie, and if it wasn't a remake, it'd be one of those Tony Scott action movies that had some big people in it. And it was okay. It isn't the best Tony Scott train movie and the best Denzel Washington train movie, which are both obviously unstoppable. I love that movie.
That's all I could think of when I was watching this too.
But in the shadow of the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, which is It's one of the greatest thrillers ever, and like you said, holds up more than holds up today. It's fun to introduce people to it, as you originally did on the show, and I could see wanting to say, let's capture that magic again 40 years later or whatever it is, but then capture the magic. Like, I found myself watching this movie and going, they have a video feed from the subway. There's no internet down there. Have any of these people
They put
been to
that
New
little
York?
video antenna up,
Yeah, I mean,
which
it's
I
just
missed
like,
when I saw it in the theater.
Well,
I'm like, that's
Travolta
bullshit.
needed that antenna to do his stock stuff. That was
Right.
his portable,
Right.
whatever the hell, gizmo. That's the MacGuffin right there. I mean, that's the
And
whatever.
he's watching the news, but he never watches the channel that's playing this feed live the entire time.
Well, even
I
when
mean,
they
this
found the
movie-
feed, they laughed about it. The guy found the feed and just closed it. He wasn't freaked out about it.
well, they don't care if any. That was the thing.
Right.
They don't care if anybody.
That's
sees
right,
it.
because that wasn't about. It was about getting the gold prices up. That's what it was about.
Right. Look, it'd be like if Die Hard, if somebody caught Hans Gruber on camera an hour in,
Right.
he wouldn't care because he's going to be quote unquote dead at the end of the movie. And that's the other thing. The plan is much more convoluted. In the first one, we took hostages on a subway train. We won $1 million, and everybody goes, "How do you take hostages on a train?" And then the movie is off. They don't have to explain who would want $1 million. What does that mean that they'll kill people? You know, like, it's just all immediately laid out, not on an expositional way. It's just thrown out immediately, and then your movie is off. And this other movie, it's just, I feel like it's constantly explaining stuff and things like that. It was like watching some of the plot lines in The Dark Knight, where it's like, or no, in The Dark Knight Rises,
Right.
where like all of a sudden we're at a stock exchange and we're gonna like, I didn't care about any of that stuff. Like, I wanted to watch Bane destroy the city, but I didn't care about what he was doing to the financial system. And this movie felt like it had extra stuff that I didn't need. But by the time you get to the end, where it's two men facing off outside on a bridge, you're like, okay, well, now I know what can happen. Someone's going to win, someone's going to lose, that kind of thing.
And
But
again,
the movie didn't
And
have that
someone's
scale.
going to bring a gallon of milk home.
Right. I mean, it's too much, and you
it's
know,
way too
it-
over the top. I mean,
it's
that's
just hard to compete with the original period.
That's
so.
what I mean. And to even talk about these two, it makes no sense. I get it. But I mean, you know, they make these movies for a reason. They're made by people who know what they're doing. Tony
It
Scott
was a
knows how
hit.
to, and it was a
It
hit.
did well, right?
Yeah, I think.
But if you watch the 1990s ABC version, I think that was more faithful to the book than even either of these two films were. And it's sort of an interesting take on it. And it's a
I
fun
was
one to
wa-
watch with the context of these two.
Was D'Onofrio the bad guy?
Yeah.
And Wahlberg was the
He was one of the bad
Matthau?
guys. He
Oh,
played
he
the what's the actor's name that was in-
Hector Alonso.
he played. I watched a great interview with
Elizondo,
him
yeah.
on YouTube
Elizondo?
talking about the making of this film, right? And how happy he was to be on the set and all the great stories about him being on the set. It's pretty good. But yeah, Donnie Wahlberg, I think, was that part in the other one. And I'm trying to think who the guy is that was the sneak. You know, I'm going to die today. Oh, it was Richard Schiff. You know, the guy from
Oh,
West
yeah.
Wing.
Oh, right, yeah.
I'm
And
going to
who was
die
the
today.
Matthau part.
It was Edward James Olmos and
really?
And Lorraine Bracco. Somehow they're connected. They were like old partners or something. Yeah, it's an interesting take. But the 2009, again, it's just Tony Scott outdoing Tony Scott. You know, like even that car chase in the original where they have to get the money from the bank to the subway. That car gets in a crash that looks pretty realistic and pretty
Yeah, it's like a real crash.
a real crash. Where this one, you know, he just
Flips
spun that
7
car.
times, falls off a bridge, flips
Unbelievable.
4 more
But
times.
that's what you go to Tony Scott movies for, right? I mean, that's the whole point.
I wanted to see
So-
a tense thriller about people getting hostages on a train.
I mean, it is tense. It's just you're comparing it to a classic. Like Drew said, if the other one didn't exist, this would be a perfectly passable action thriller by Tony Scott.
You know, I got to say, if the other one didn't exist.
Well, of course.
Now, to me, what kills, a lot of things kill the sequel. I mean, first off, I want to say I love the original film.
Yes.
Right now, I'm writing a blog about the 10 best train films ever. And I got to admit, it was tough to put this one first or second, the original film.
What's
I'm
it
gonna go with
battling
Runaway
with?
Train is number one.
Which one?
Spoilers.
Runaway Train?
Because it has more trainness in it.
Well, Unstoppable is all train.
Yeah, that's also on the list.
Yeah.
But you know, the backstory is just ridiculous. It's so unnecessary and it weighs you down. And there's so many things, having written movies, the things you do for the stars, like having this final showdown between Travolta and Denzel, and you're like, it's like, well, they're the stars, the action stars. It's an action movie. Gotta have this happen. But compare that to the classic ending of the original, where it's Martin Balsam, and then it's a total bullshit police interview with Walter Matthau, which is the interview is very consistent with his character. He's he's consistent throughout. He's not
and the greatest end cut in film history. That cut.
Yeah, and it's like Martin Balsam's been sneezing the whole film, and he's like leaving. You think he's making, and then he sneezes, and he opens the door, and he sticks his head in,
right,
and you hear that classic theme again.
Yeah,
I mean, that is like one of the great endings of any film. Having these guys shoot it out. You better kill me. I got my gun. I'm going to shoot you. One of us is going to die. But to me, I just never bought the Travolta character for 1 second. He's like a Wall Street banker. He's speaking like he's from the streets. And, okay, he's been in jail. He picked up some dialect. But also, he's got this big tattoo on his neck. It's sort of like, I don't buy that this guy's going to go to jail. He's a guy that would fly to Iceland with ass models, and then he's going to put this big tattoo on his neck, prison tattoo on his neck. I don't believe that for a half a second. And he is nowhere near as scary as Robert Shaw. It's sort of like the harder he tries, the less effective he is in my mind. But once again, I'm comparing him to Robert Shaw.
Yeah, you can't.
Had I not seen the other film, I may not be doing that.
Well, and he's just doing Travolta too.
But even the fact that he's a Wall Street guy and he's talking the way he is, he's got the tattoo on his neck. Even that inherent, that doesn't gel for me. But once again, I would be more accepting of it if it wasn't for, Robert Shaw. And I think Denzel Washington does a great job, with what he's given. He's not as funny as, Walter Matthau. He's got an odd niche in the movie business. He's essentially a character actor who gets leads. And he has played in action films. I think there was the one where he's the bank robber.
Charlie Varick?
Yeah, Charlie Varick. And all. So, he's played those roles. But he's essentially a comic actor, throughout most of his
but
career.
the humor in the first one is just off the charts.
Yeah,
and not Waka Waka humor, just humor like this.
Yeah, it's like
the scene with the
New
Japanese
Yorkers.
Tourists and
And
like
when he
you
meets the
mentioned,
one guy,
Seinfeld's
it's like,
dad.
you're a different guy
Ben
than
Stiller's
I
dad, I
expected.
mean.
It's like, you're taller or something. It's like, and it's just.
Well, they you see they called that out in this one.
Yeah.
When he met Denzel, he goes, "I thought you'd be taller." He kind of played that. That's an old joke. Too.
Yeah, and I had seen the TV movie version before. I couldn't watch it now because it's on Roku, and the only place it was playing is on Roku. But they did have like the first 8 minutes on
YouTube.
On YouTube, which I did watch, and I didn't like it. I just thought it was like way too cutty and jumping around with the
Well, it's the
camera.
90s, man. It's that sensibility.
It had the Stuart Copeland score. I didn't like it. It's hard to compare anything to that David Shire score.
No, that's what I mean. I know,
But-
John. I know it's confusing because it's hard to compare the two. There's no comparison between.
Yeah, but also it's like what I didn't like about it. It was just too cutty, and it's sort of like you go to someone looking, and then they go to a POV shot, but it would be from like this angle, and it's sort of like, wait a minute, what's looking at him? The guy's belly button's looking. It's like the media editing didn't work. The cuts didn't work.
You're talking about the TV show now.
I'm talking about the TV movie.
That's on Roku.
Yeah, it's on Roku. If you got
I'm
Roku, it's
going to check that out.
apparently free on Roku.
There's
But,
I'm telling you, watch Mark Kermode's review of this film. It's great. He really nails it. So John, have you seen? You've seen both, right?
Well, no.
Which one hadn't?
I hadn't seen the first one.
Wow.
Wow.
So when I saw this movie, I knew a little bit about the other one, but I hadn't seen it. So my take's going to be different than you guys for my first viewing of it. I found it a little too frenetic, but again, that's Tony Scott, like you said, but it was a little distracting to me. But I thought Travolta, even though he was over the top, I thought he was pretty scary. Now, not having seen the first one, I didn't have anything to compare it to. So I thought he was scary. And when he was threatening people with the gun to their head, I found that tense. I thought the tension of the movie was good. What, I mean, the whole gold thing was to me kind of stupid. That's just to show how smart this guy was. And the fact that they were able to figure things out so easily about his identity and all that, I didn't buy that for a second. But
I want to bring that up too.
I actually liked the dynamic between Denzel Washington just happened to answer it. He happened to be there. And then they're going after him for the bribe he took, so they think he might be it was Torturo. I've never seen him play such a normal character in a movie as this one, and I thought he was great. So I didn't mind the movie because I did not compare it to the first one. So I actually liked it. I thought the ending was ridiculous, and we went after him with the gun and followed him out to the bridge. It just seemed out of character for that person.
He's a civil servant.
Yeah, and he made that really clear. I mean, he did the big thing by delivering the money. Chasing him down was something that I didn't buy for a second.
He ran down the street.
I actually like the movie. I actually, even though Travolta plays bad guys and he's real over the top, in this one, it worked better than the other ones. Okay, now having said that, after it was over, I said I have to watch the first one. So I watched it right after I watched this one. So now having seen both of them, a couple things struck me. I thought Robert Shaw, the way he played that, I don't know if I would say it was much scarier, but it was a different kind of scary the way he played it. And I really, really liked it. I thought the death scenes in the remake had far more gravitas than the death scenes in the first one, because there was a lot more. I was absolutely shocked by how much humor there was in that first one. Even after people got shot, there was still a lot of humor. Maybe that's Matthau, Jerry Stiller. It's all that back and forth. So I was a little surprised by that. The simplicity of the story was much better than the remake, the convoluted remake. Okay. And you guys talk about backstory. You don't put Denzel Washington as a lead, don't give him backstory. So I don't really care about that.
Why do you need it?
Because Denzel Washington won't do it. So that's why you do that. Wow. So that I get. But I think the mysteriousness, even the disguises that they used, were just little things about the first one that I really did like. But I was surprised by the humor of the first one. I was not expecting that. And Matthau is great. But I mean, the first one is a better film, I think. But again, not having seen the first one before I watched the remake, I think I enjoyed the remake more because I hadn't seen the first one, which is just right along what you guys are saying. If the first one didn't exist, you'd look at it differently, right? Well, I looked at it differently because I never saw the original. So, and I think Sean's absolutely right. I think that ending, the hero and the villain still confront each other, but this time, the villain takes himself out, which is, they did it in the second one too, but it was just an action scene. So that I really like too. So it's
funny. I
sorry, I've taken all the bribes I can this month.
Right.
Or whatever.
Yeah. I found the deaths in the first one to be very powerful. I mean, the deaths in the second one were just over the top. 17 bullets to a chest.
There was hardly any reaction to it.
There was no, but the poor conductor in the first one.
The first one was the only one that they knew. But the cop who got shot.
That became a big plot point.
I know.
I completely disagree with that, but that's fine. I mean, I don't know. I felt like that other one was just as actually way more powerful.
Well, also too, in the first film, the misogyny and sexism and racism of all the characters is like
it was 1974.
No, but I mean, they were playing it. They were leaning into it. But they're, I did like the death scene better in this. In
the remake.
The remake, that he electrocuted himself, which to me is would be a much more painful death than.
No, he means the original. The original,
the original. It's like, you no longer have the death penalty in this state. That's correct. and then he he electrocutes himself. It's like, to me that's much more powerful. But that end with Martin Balsam, and you kind of almost root for the guy because he's like the loser. You know what I mean? He's like, I'm gonna die. He runs away with the money,
and he didn't shoot anybody, right? If I remember right, he didn't shoot anybody.
Yeah. And he had a grievance.
And his tiny little apartment, right? And that tiny little thing, and
that was very realistic.
That's what I mean. The backstory thing just frustrates me. I just don't think you need it when you drop in a film, and it's just he's there at the mic. That's it. Why do we need all that? You know what?
One thing, talk about Denzel Washington needing the backstory. James Gandolfini identifying who the
well, you made a big point of that the last time we talked about this.
But it's they got a big actor to play that role,
big star.
So he had to have a big moment,
right?
Other than that, I thought he was generally pretty good. I thought he did a great performance in that movie.
Now, Drew, had you seen both?
Yes, I saw the original one. I've seen it a whole bunch of times, and then I saw the new one in the theater. And I would say my experience with it was I had measured interest. I mean, Tony Scott's made some movies I liked. I like the people that are in the movie. It's the framework of the story is a great thriller, and it's a different New York, but it's still about a gritty city story and city services and the subway and real people and all that kind of stuff. And I remember thinking, well, this just isn't very good. It's not horrible, but it isn't very good. And again, it's hard. I think John's experience, your experience with that, watching it out of order one after the other is really interesting, because if I even think about the remake, I'd go, yeah, it was okay. There's a lot worse remakes out there. But the original one is just one of my favorite movies, never mind thrillers. And I mean, that soundtrack alone is fantastic. I don't know who composed the soundtrack for Pelham, and I don't remember what it sounds like. But, Sean humming it at the beginning of the show, it was like, yeah, you should. It's great stuff. So I think the remake was fine. But, it's one of those movies to me, if you're going to do it, you have a shot of making it good. It's not like if somebody says, oh, let's remake Casablanca, I'll be like, well, that seems like a bad idea. But there are also movies that you can keep remaking the story because it's the same story, even though it's not really the same characters, like Rio Bravo, Assault on Precinct 13, Assault on Precinct 13, the remake. Those are all good movies that are all basically siege, with the sheriff against the outlaws, all that kind of stuff. Those are great movies, but they're not. I mean, the Precinct 13 ones are straight remakes, but even that, it goes its own way in ways that work. And this just went in its own way. The remake went in its own way. It's like, well, we're a big bloated Hollywood movie with big movie stars, so we have to be longer and we have to be more stuff, and the villain has to be more clever. And it's like the first movie didn't need any of that. So that means that the second movie didn't really need any of that.
Yeah, well, I don't disagree. And like I said, this one's a guilty pleasure to me, but the other one is just all time.
Drew, did you see the TV movie?
No, I never have, but you said it's on Roku. I actually will check it out. I haven't watched a lot of stuff on Roku because they have stuff with ads, which I really didn't like watching the Weird Al Yankovic movie with Daniel Radcliffe that way. But I will check it out because I'm curious, and I suspect I won't last that long with it either. But I didn't know it existed until this week, so it's interesting.
I've told you guys this before, but I love to get, when I take my train to work, my subway train, and I have the theme song on my phone, and I'll get on a crowded subway and just blast that in my ears. It's so much fun. It's unbelievable.
You should probably try doing that while you chew gum and take hostages and see how that feels. That could be.
It's
really
just
fun.
such an interesting, especially a crowded train, to put that to have that soundtrack going in the thing. It's a blast. Well, obviously, I say Yippee-Ki-Yay for the first one, hands down, no questions asked. I'm about like half in the middle for the other one. I mean, I think you should see it because it is a remake of a classic, and it is a Tony Scott, and it's Denzel Washington and John Travolta, all the things we've talked about. I think it should be watched, but there's no way does it hold a candle to the first one in any sense of the word. But like we said, if the first one didn't exist, this is a passable film. So that's my take. That's my take on this remake theme. You guys can do whatever you want with yours.
Well, I feel the same way, but my opinion, and not having seen the entire TV movie, is that it's skippable. the TV one. I mean, I kind of wanted to see it for the cast,
Yeah.
you know, but
I wouldn't say it's skippable. I mean, if you love the, I mean, I don't know. I love anything Pelham 1, 2, 3. That's it. I mean, like nothing compares to the first one, but I still am fascinated by any take on this film because how that other one is just so much in my DNA right now.
Well, you know what? I mean, it's a hard story to kill. It reminds me of a film that's not on the wheel, which is Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The 1956 thing is a classic. So is the late 70s one.
The 78.
That's a classic. And also Body Snatchers, the Abel Ferrara film.
Yeah, that doesn't suck either.
Yeah.
And also Nicole Kidman did one too.
And the Nicole Kidman one sucked.
Yeah,
the Invasion.
They gave it a happy ending. It's like the guy who directed that one was the guy who did Untertag, you know, the Downfall, the Hitler movie.
Oh, right, yeah.
Apparently they took the movie away from him and like reshot it. I would love to have seen, I'm sure his didn't suck, but this Nicole Kidman was like, it's like, how can a story that good ever fail? And I feel that way about Pelham 1, 2, 3. And I'm not saying, you know, don't ever watch the TV one, but it's like, I don't think it's in the essential level of these two. But I'm sure it will work on some level. And I'd like to see James almost in it, you know. And,
yeah. No, it's an interesting take on it. But, so, all right. Well, yeah. So what we'll do is we'll spin the wheel for the next one. Whoever, if it lands on one that you did, you can bring however you want to compare the two, not compare the two, only compare the remake, you know, talk about the remake, whatever you want to do. But,
well, before we do that, one quick question.
Yeah.
Are we each time we spin the wheel, are we voting someone off the podcast? Because we keep losing people. I don't know, is that like an official
It's
part
like
of the
Survivor.
show?
I don't know.
It's like Survivor.
You know, there is this term in entertainment called the show must go on, but I don't know. I think, Drew, didn't you drop an axe on your toe one time and still made a podcast?
I did.
Yeah.
The blood spot was in the carpet until I tore it out to sell the house. I was proud of
I remember. See, that's an indelible image.
Cleveland. And I'm still doing the show.
I've been on in a men's room.
You have?
Yes,
You're
on the New Jersey Turnpike.
So yeah, don't hang out there anyway. It's not that
first week we don't do a cage match. Chris is out. Yeah.
We know the commitment.
That's right.
All right,
Chris
so
is in jail.
On. All right, so there we go. We got 12 left. Mine was the 13th. So we'll spin it. If it lands on one of yours, you can bring it next week, okay?
Magnificent Seven.
Okay, Ghostbusters, right?
Oh. Who brought that?
That's Sean's, right?
I brought Ghostbusters. And the reason why is because I love the first film. And the second film is perhaps the most controversial remake in Hollywood history. I wouldn't say controversial, the most hated remake in Hollywood history.
It definitely
goes up with like the last trilogy of Star Wars.
Right.
As being absolutely hated, you know. And I will say, I'm going to have to watch it because Debbie and I got, you know, when I used to get the Blu-ray deal from Netflix, got the Blu-ray, we were watching it, it was late, and we were tired, and we stopped watching it. And then, like, the next day, do you want to watch it again? Nah, let's just send the Blu-ray back. Debbie was like, so, and we did.
All right, so we're not talking about the Reitman version, the Reitman. We're talking
no. We're talking the girl.
You're talking the Afterlife.
Yeah.
No, we're not talking that.
Who directed the remake with the women? Who's that?
Paul Feig.
Paul Feig, yeah. Paul Feig really is full of himself, I think.
Yeah, it was so hilarious too. Just so funny.
So there we go. Ghostbusters next week. So
if anyone else wants to talk about any of the other ones, you know, because I think we should feel free.
Again, Ghostbusters, the original, is such a beloved. I mean, you know, again, how do you remake that one? And they tried, and we'll talk about it, right?
Yeah, that had very delicate chemistry between the elements of the film,
and it was funny.
Yeah.
So let's make sure we call that out.
All right.
But it'll be interesting to see what genre you consider these films.
I'm sorry, I don't think confronting the paranormal is a laughing matter, John.
He's flying me
in places.
He's flying me.
All right. Well, there you go. So next week, Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Ghostbusters. All right.
Who are you going to call if you're watching this podcast?
Hit the button there. That button.
Yeah. Slam it.
Slam it. All right. Let's do a round of what you watch. Now I know Chris isn't here. Go ahead. What?
Before we do that,
did somebody?
I want to say two things. One is I heard that Netflix is shutting down their DVD only service this fall.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
I haven't subscribed to that for a long time, and it actually made me really sad because there's so many movies that are on disc that are not on streaming and will never be on streaming. And I guess they're just going to take all those discs and sell them or throw them in the landfill.
You can still get DVDs from Netflix? Yeah, I didn't even know that.
It's called DVD.com, and it's still the red envelope in the mail. And most of us haven't, of course, subscribed to that for years. And
I held on to it.
And they're also cracking down on the password sharing.
Right. Yeah. But that happening and the fact that I felt that way, it reminded me of last week's episode of Indian Cinemaniacs, that these movies are disappearing in this format, although some of them are closer to actually disappearing. And then Kelly said, well, maybe they'll turn into bracelets. Yeah. And I said, well, they're round already, so that could happen. And then the other thing I wanted to say, the breaking news from today, truly a titan of American entertainment and history and pride of being an American. Harry Belafonte died today, and that was just really an extraordinary extraordinary man. And I told Kelly, I said, I hope that, the highlight of his life wasn't when he got to chat with me and say hello with my aunt in a restaurant in New York. I hope he had more fun doing other things, but that was pretty special for me to be able to say that I actually shook Harry Belafonte's hand, because he was really an amazing, extraordinary man. And even the interviews you see from just the past few years talking about his life and what he had done and his choices that he made, he was really just incredible. So that was, we talk about people dying every week, but this guy was really
that's amazing.
like
look into what the downfall of the Smothers Brothers was, something they did with Harry Belafonte.
Oh, really?
Yeah, real controversial.
Was that remade as Downfall, the Hitler movie by the director of Invasion?
Not quite.
I've only seen the remake then.
It was big back when.
I was thinking about Harry Belafonte because when I did a previous "What Will You Watch," a very obscure film starring Zero Marcel called The Angel Levine, where Harry Belafonte played the Angel Levine, the black Jewish angel. And to me, it's one of the weirdest films I ever seen. I know on my blog one day, hopefully I'll do a really deep dive in it, comparing it to the original story and the kind of odd choices they made. And it's a film I can't widely recommend to everyone, but I found it fascinating. And also, what was it? The Flesh, the World, and the Devil, where there's 3 survivors of a nuclear war. City. And he's like, I forgot, it was Inger Stevens. I don't know who the woman is.
Yeah, Inger Stevens, isn't it?
Yeah, and they're like going to get romantically involved, even though they're black and white. And then a white guy shows up, and the Harry Belafonte character sort of like starts bowing out automatically from the attentions of the girl, which is kind of, a fascinating thing. But I remember seeing that film when I was very young and really enjoying that one too. And
well, our younger audience members will know him from Beetlejuice with the Deo song that was featured in that movie. That's Harry Belafonte too. So,
and our younger audience members that have had the misfortune of seeing the film may know him from White Man's Burden, starring John Travolta.
Oh yeah, classic.
Truly a classic bad.
Another Travolta.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that was before his comeback. No, that was right after it, wasn't it?
I don't know. Rest in peace, Harry Belafonte.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, Drew, what'd you watch this week?
Well, I'm hoping that next week I'll have 1 or maybe even 2 movies I'll have seen in the theater to talk about. But this week was 2 things I saw on the TV screen. One was Alex Bornstein, who we know as Miss Swan from Mad TV and the voice of Lois Griffin, and just wrapping up the last season of The Adventures of Mrs. Maisel. She has I guess it's a comedy special that's on Prime. She called it her perverse TED Talk. And it's kind of a little bit of one-woman show, a little bit of stand-up, a little bit of singing, talking about her age and her place in the industry and her divorce and finding herself again. And it's really funny and it's really filthy. And her parents are in the audience and she keeps saying terrible things and then thanking them for coming. And I don't know if you're a fan of hers, but She's wonderful, and it's a really fun show. It's called Alex Bornstein, Corsets and Clown Suits. In the first 5-10 minutes, I was like, really? Are we going to? But it found its way, and I really kind of enjoyed it. And the other thing that I've been watching, there have only been 4 episodes so far. I don't know if it'll be 8 or 10, but it's the 3rd season of the show Dave, which is on FX, about basically the rapper Dave Bird, Lil Dicky, has been doing this show now for 3 seasons. It's about a fictionalized version of himself, and it's very FX. It's cut from the same cloth as the network that gave you Atlanta and things like that. So it's very smart. It's very funny. It's a lot of really uncomfortable, weird stuff, a lot of gorgeous people, and there's really not much like Lil Dicky on television, and the tension between Lil Dicky, the rapper, and Dave Bird playing this version of himself. That show is so satisfying and so fun. So I recommend that you check it out. And it's the same network that gave you great stuff like, What We Do in the Shadows and Louie and all these other great things. So if you have not seen Dave, start at the beginning because it's very, very funny and very satisfying.
All right. Sean.
Okay, well, I'm always doing my cross-generational thing. We had the grandkids over Friday night, and I tried to get them to watch Them, the giant ant movie from 1955. And we were doing other things. We were teaching the kids to play poker as well, Texas Hold'em.
Wow, that's
quite
a thing.
That's very important.
Yeah,
and they're actually pretty good at it. And for a black and white film, it attracted their attention at the beginning because it opens with like a 7-year-old girl wandering through the desert in Canatonic, and it caught them, but they didn't stay with the movie. So today, one of my granddaughters was sick. She was over our house. Debbie was not feeling well, so she was sleeping, and she's like, "Grandpa, do you want to watch one of my shows?" And I'm like, "Okay, it's on Netflix, Powder Puff Girls." And
geez.
now I watch a lot of kids shows. Like everyone goes through their Paw Patrol thing, which is kind of like icky, like nothing in it, kind of controversial, or Blaze and the Monster Machines. All those kind of shows are like Mickey's Funhouse. And they're all stuff. It's like I watch it, I'm like, oh God, why did they grow up with Warner Brother cartoons? So, but to me, I really kind of enjoyed this. It's like 3 seasons, and they're all 20 minutes long, and it's on Netflix, and I actually kind of enjoyed them. I think there was a lot of adult. It was like the rating was 7+, and there was it was like a spoof. It was almost like Adult Spin without the raunchy Adult Spin stuff. You know what I mean? It was sort of like spoofing shows, and it had like a narrator that sounded like he was from doing Superman in the 1950s.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
And they like had this, this mayor that's kind of like the guy from Monopoly, and he has this assistant. I mean, the women are all like outrageously buxom, like you can't do, so it's a spoof. And like the one guy's the mayor is short, and assistant's really tall, and like really buxom, and you never see her head. Her head's always out of frame, and it's like they do all, it's like this stuff, the kids aren't necessarily, well, my granddaughter's like, you'll never see her head. But it's like, you don't know why. They're just, they're spoofing that, you're just seeing her breast, in it. So I was oddly entertained by the episodes of Powerpuff Girls. We were watching. It's these
Powder
three girls
Puff or Powerpuff? Powder Puff.
Power. Because
No
they're
D.
superheroes.
Yes,
No D,
Powerpuff.
ironically.
Yeah.
Powerpuff,
So
okay.
it's this scientist who makes them. He was making them of sugar and spice and everything nice and pouring them into a thing, and accidentally poured in chemical X, so that when the girls appeared, they all had superpowers. So
Wow.
they're like.
I don't think
7 or
I'll
8
ever
years
watch that,
old.
but thank you.
Yeah, you'll probably not. No one watching this will.
I know
Sounds
I've
like-
seen it.
enjoyed it.
In the
Sounds like
culture.
something from Movie Strange.
Yeah.
Maybe. Is that it? Anything else?
No,
Okay.
that's enough.
All right, John.
So I all the episodes of The Mandalorian dropped, the 3rd season of The Mandalorian, so I finished watching that. That studio that produces those shows, they've got something great with The Mandalorian, and they just I don't know what their thinking is. It's bait and switch. They take a great character and put him in the background. It's lazy script writing. It became every episode was a quest for something, and it kind of took away from the overall theme of it. And I love your baby Yoda. His name is Grogu, but Baby Yoda. But there's a fight scene with 3 Praetorian guards with lightsabers, and they're going after little baby Grogu, and all he's doing is flipping up on a chandelier up above. I don't know what they're doing to Star Wars. It breaks my heart because
talking about he force pushed them a bunch of times. He didn't just flip around.
Did you see it, Drew?
Yeah.
Oh my God. It was just so I don't know what they're doing. I just can't figure it out. They've got a great show, the first season especially, but I just it's very disappointing. And they made this big announcement of future Star Wars films, and I have no faith in these people whatsoever, other than the animated stuff that they're doing, which is fantastic. It just for someone like me, in fact, I'm going to see the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi in the movie theaters on May 1st.
But you won't be seeing the one you saw 40 years ago.
No,
you will not.
No, I won't. But I have it. I have it on Laserdisc. But it breaks my heart to see what they're doing for something that I love so much. But anyway, so that's what I watched. I watched all of them. So
I'm sorry.
No, you're not. You're not. You don't care.
I could care less.
I know you don't.
I could care less. Grow up. Watch something adult.
You don't like hairy feet either.
I don't. All right. So I actually watched an adult documentary, and I'm not a reader. So this is somebody I had never heard of until Maria and I watched this documentary. It's called Judy Blume Forever. And Judy Blume is Sean probably knows, Drew probably knows. She's a writer from the start in the 50s, a suburban housewife who started writing for kids, for adolescents, for middle school kids.
A big movie just came out.
There's a movie out now, right? Her first book, I think, is called "Hey God, It's Me, Margaret."
Oh, I've heard of that.
And really, what happened is she got so she goes through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. She's a housewife in the 50s and 60s, suburban. Starts writing these books, puts them out in the 70s. Huge hits. Kids love them because she's talking about masturbation.
You're talking about what I grew up on. You guys
and
are
women
so much
having
older
periods and very honest conversations. She's getting letters. They're going back and forth to her from kids who have lifelong letters that he's wrote. Reagan comes in the 80s, and now it's banning all her books. Her books are taken out of libraries, and all this stuff is going on. And it's just a really interesting. She's like 86 now, 83. I don't know. She's still alive. It's a fascinating story about someone who got married very young. Like I said, grew up in the 50s. I think she was married in the 60s. Became hugely popular in the 70s, writing these books, and she's still writing. And now she owns a bookstore in Key West. Her and her latest husband, her last husband, so I guess, bought a place in Key West.
You never know. She's still 86.
Yeah, but this is her lifelong love. I mean, this is her guy, and they have a bookstore in Key West. You can go visit, and she curates books and has all her books there. But I guess she has a huge following of people who started as an adolescent who still write to her and still, idolize her. Basically,
what's this doc on?
It's on Prime. It's called Judy Blume Forever.
Strange that it's coming out now, just when the movie.
Gee, isn't that strange? That's wild that they would do that. It's amazing. What timing? Anyway, it's a good doc, and it's a fascinating story that I knew nothing about. Like I said, not a big reader, and especially not as a middle school kid reading these things. So
they weren't for you.
They were I think they weren't, but she had a lot of men on this doc talking about her too. So
she wrote all kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
that was why growing up reading her books about super fudge and things like that, and then you discover later, she also wrote some pretty adult stuff. It was like discovering that the guy who wrote the BFG also wrote My Uncle Oswald about stealing the semen of all the Nobel Prize winners in history. So it's
I
like,
guess
these writers are real people who write different things for different audiences, and it's fun to discover that. It's confusing if you discover it and you're still 11, but it's kind of neat. She is an extraordinary person. I haven't watched that movie yet, but Kelly watched it and said that she's a firecracker and it's really entertaining.
I guess her adult book, the first one was called YKY, all about a woman.
I remember when that came out.
Yeah. And there's a great clip of her having a debate with Pat Buchanan. It's just stunning. Anyway, so that was
And
mine.
he's still around too.
Yeah, he is. It's amazing. All right, so there you go. Next week we do Ghostbusters. I think that came out in 2016, right? If I recall. Yeah. Okay. Very funny.
If you like this film, if you don't like this film, you're a Trump voter. That's what the stars were saying on Twitter.
Yeah.
This was the first film that I remember where they were baiting the audience. That they were
right.
like
the director
attacking.
came out before that, and if
well,
you don't
also
like this, you're
in
a
the film,
misogynist.
they call out those people.
No, but I mean, they were saying if you don't like this film, you're a misogynist.
Right.
It's like, no, the film just sucks.
Right.
I mean, I was willing to give it an equal shot.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this next week. To me, that didn't destroy the franchise. It was the second one that destroyed it. I thought.
You ever
that
listen to him
too.
talk about this film? You ever listen to that guy?
Yeah.
Paul Feig. It's like, what a blowhard. How can he even think that what he's saying with his suit and all the shit he does when he's directing? Come on, man. And he directed Bridesmaids, so he came off that.
Yeah.
Which was a great movie.
That was lightning in a
funny
bottle.
movie,
That was
yeah.
lightning in a bottle.
Hilarious movie.
Melissa McCarthy. I
Yeah.
think that was our first introduction to her. Lightning in a
Isn't he
bottle.
married to her?
No, she's
No.
the guy that plays the FBI agent in Bridesmaids. She's married to.
Right.
Oh, okay.
He's the
I
one
knew she
doing
was
the
married.
commercial with her now,
Right.
the
Yeah.
Airbnb commercial. That's her husband.
Mhm.
And they try to do movies together that he directs and she stars in, and they always flop. I don't know what the deal is there.
Yeah.
But if you listen
Also,
to Paul
it's a
Feig,
comedy,
you're like,
and
oh.
comedies suck now.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway, all right. Well, we'll talk about that next week. Let's not blow it all right now.
If we can all make it next week, we don't never know.
Yeah.
Who
Show
will fall
must
by
go
the
on.
wayside.
Maybe we'll have more. Maybe we'll.
I mean, with
less.
Ghostbusters 2016 being on the plate, I don't know if I'll be able to make it. I might get sick. We'll have to see.
All right, well, I'll be here. Someone has to record this.
Something strange in the neighborhood.
All right. Have a good week. Stay safe. Please, Sean, please get Debbie better. Do whatever she needs from you. Okay? Okay? Okay. That's all we have. All right, everybody. Have a good week.
See you guys.
I'll see you. Bye.